Hello, and welcome to our first webinar of the season. Thanks for logging in. My name is Matt Malley. I'm a technical director for Cannon Soccer Club. My email is down there if you want to reach me at some point. We'll go through about 30 minutes of a presentation. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to email me. My email will also be listed at the very end as well. So we want to talk about match analysis and the whole concept and skill of reading the game. I think that skill itself is incredibly vital. It's something that coaches need to work on, and I call this more or less developing an analytical eye. So why do we even want to analyze matches? Well, we're coaches, so we certainly want to improve team performance during the game and see how that relates to our training sessions the following weeks. For the purpose of evaluation, you certainly want to try to recruit players on the older age groups and with your respective teams, individual player development. In regards to scouting, preparing for a next opponent, how we're going to play them, where are their strengths and weaknesses, that's something good to know. Education, for sure, improve your analytical eye, the quality of playing, refereeing, as well as coaching. The observation part helps you with that as well. So what are some of the benefits in this educational process? I'm going to list 10 of them, and there's certainly many more one can argue. So training your analytical eye. It's a skill. It takes time. Individuals who've been doing this for a long time may see different things than you if you're just getting started. Acquiring knowledge, gaining experience, and reading the game, analyzing the game certainly helps to improve your concentration and sharpens your ability to anticipate the next move. Okay, action-reaction concept there. So also you are able to better assess the possibilities in each situation as they arise, picking up patterns of play, have a better understanding of strategies and their respective influences on the game, and ultimately identifying individual qualities as well. So in analyzing matches, it's important to distinguish two different viewpoints. Players and referees have more of a dynamic viewpoint because they're constantly moving on the field. So they have more of a back-to-front perspective, as opposed to coaches who are more or less static. Certainly in the youth game, they're not as static as they should be, but nonetheless, they have more of a side-to-side movement patterns. So in regards to scouting, what are the key elements we look for in an opponent that certainly would help us prepare for the challenges when we're facing them next weekend or beyond? So listing a few of them, you want to look at certainly the broader picture, maybe a system of play or the change of system of play, 4-4-2, 4-3-3, and so on and so forth. You look at their style of play. Are they looking to be very direct, get to the goal with fewest passes possible? Or maybe they're trying to patiently build up from the back. What are some of the key players? Okay, what are their strengths and their respective weaknesses overall? Again, patterns of play. How do they get the ball up front? What are the movement patterns? What about restarts? Whether it's free kicks, corner kicks, who lines up, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the next few slides. So what are some ways to beat them? And one of my favorites, and I like to do that as well quite often, the cause and effect. What do they do, and how are we going to respond to it? So here's a quote from Mario Zagallo, arguably one of the best coaches in the world, one of the only ones probably who has won the World Cup with the Brazilian national team, both as a player and a coach, I believe on 2 occasions, and I think in 1994 he was an assistant coach to the Brazilian national team, while a few years back he was the head coach. So he said the good coach is not the one who sees the game, but the one who reads the game. So in reading the game, what are some of the key features? Well, it certainly relates to what do you see. You look at players, whether it's within their respective lines, blocks. You look at the 4 components of their technical competence, decision-making in regards to tactics, what are the physical attributes, and certainly psychological as well. How do they rebound after a goal? What do they do when they lose the ball, lose possession of the ball? Some of these things. And you may want to ask yourself, what are some of these things you can fix? What's within your control? And that's an important question to ask, because many times as coaches, you may look to fix things that are way beyond your control or may take a very long time in a given time frame. So how can you fix it, right? You can change a strategy, maybe a shape. You might want to swap players. But ultimately, I think all of us as coaches want to ask ourselves, how do you get better at reading the game? How do you improve? What are some of the steps you can do? So in regards to coaching, I think many of us can agree that we're looking for coaches who are emotionally controlled. Certainly not reliving your soccer career, avoiding the ex-player mentality. You want to be intellectually engaged, and that comes from continuous education, whether it's formal or informal, and also getting more experience. With that would come the understanding of systems and styles of play, and whether we like it or not, we need to have a holistic development, holistic approach. So you're looking at employing different systems of communication, whether it's one-on-one, using the modern media, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, how do you behave under pressure? Are you composed? Are your players able to look up to you when it gets tough? Now, during the game, however, what should we do as coaches? Now, there's certainly differences between youth players and adult or adolescent players, teenagers. Coaches' role changes during games, while you can argue that for youngest age groups, you may want to give a little bit of instruction, and those may be very broad instructions, as if, hey, have a look, what do you see, as opposed to telling the players what to do. Now, in the older age groups, well, you have to sit back and watch. You watch and concentrate on things such as systems of play, styles. What are the key players again? You look at your opponents, not just yourself, certainly, and referees, perhaps, to some extent. Now, a system and style of play, was there a change to that? But ultimately, I don't think you should narrate or dictate play. Soccer is an autonomous game. We want players to make their own decisions. So in regards to players, when we look at analyzing an individual player, what is his or her role in the team? Okay, what are their respective strengths and weaknesses? And you can look at the 4 components: technical, tactical, physical, psychological there in regards to evaluation. If this is your team, you may certainly want to jot down ideas of how to improve this player, and perhaps what contribution did this individual player make to a team. And on the other side of that, did this player perhaps weaken the team's performance in any way? And if so, what training session would mostly benefit this player and at the same time be beneficial to the entire team, or at least a line or a block of players that are within his area? So here we're probably talking more of functional training that is certainly specific to a player and the area they play in. So in terms of analyzing blocks of players, some systematic ways, what is the size and the shape of the group? Is it a flat back 4? Is it central 3 midfielders? Is there 3 forwards, 1 center striker with 2 wingers, and so on and so forth? How many are actually operating there, right? And what are their respective roles in the attack and defense? And I'll say more about that a little bit later. So again, strengths and weaknesses of these players in their group. Looking back at the principles of play, how are those executed in the attack? We're talking about penetration, support, mobility, width, depth, and certainly a little bit of creativity goes a long way. Defensively speaking, how do they react when they're not in possession? Is there pressure immediately applied upon the ball? Is there good coverage? Are we balanced vertically and horizontally compact? And ultimately, in the modern game, we look at how is the group block or players, how do they react in the time of transition? Essentially, key moments when we're in possession, when we're out of possession, at the time when we switch these two. And do they recognize the visual cues, when to put pressure on the ball, whether we're numbers up, numbers down, whether maybe we should pinch in, drop off, and the like. So having said that, how would you improve this group? Again, going back to functional training, certainly phases of play where you can constantly repeat certain patterns and scenarios, okay? And what training sessions, again, would benefit this block and certainly the whole team as well. So now let's look at the framework, basic framework. And we're talking about defensive alignment. We'll progress all the way to the forwards as well. Now in defensive alignment, don't forget, we're also talking about the actual goalkeeper there as well. So numbers in the back, how many back players? Is it a flat back four? Is it back four with a stopper, sweeper maybe? Zonal back three, perhaps like in a 3-5-2 system where defensively you may be 5-3-2. In the attack, you're 3-5-2, depending on how the two outside midfielders drop off, pitch in, and go forward. Is there a sweeper, perhaps stationary sweeper, more or less centralized with two-man markers? And what is the goalkeeper's role in that alignment, and what are his or her tendencies? I think you can tell a lot about a goalkeeper. And you certainly need to look away from the ball if you want to see what he or she is doing when they're out of possession. So in regards to midfield composition, the numbers in the midfield, you look how many. Is there a static midfielder, sort of a holding midfielder? Are there flank players tight in central areas? And how do they play? Is one attacking, two holding, or vice versa? And who dictates the rhythm of play? Is there a certain player that constantly is looking to intercept and change the point of attack? Who tracks back? And who stays and who goes forward? Okay. In regards to forwards, and again, we're talking about defensive principles here again, we look at the numbers of forward players. Now, if there's two forwards, they rarely would look to intercept the ball. They would probably be forcing the ball to one side or the other, trying to make the play more predictable, as opposed to three forwards, which can often actually intercept the ball pretty high. So do forwards track back? Do they go back and have defensive roles? If so, which ones? Are any of them potentially left up high without any defensive responsibilities? Are the forwards channeling the play or winning possession? Again, it's just like I mentioned a second ago, 2 versus 3 forwards. And where do they set the line of confrontation? Essentially, where do they come meet us? So defensive tendencies overall. Where will they meet us? Where is our line of confrontation? Where is their line of confrontation? In this example here, you see that number 9 is forcing the ball, making it predictable back into the center. 7 is pinching in and everybody's sliding. So they're meeting him pretty up high. This is probably a desperate situation where we want to win the ball and get a goal back quickly. Maybe we're down a goal and there's a few minutes left on the clock. So the line of confrontation, is it low? Is it high? All over the field? Where will they force us? Again, away from goal? That depends certainly on the strength of your team or the choices the coach makes. Inside, down the flanks. What about team compactness? How do they slide? How are they connected? Is it good front to back or side to side? Is somebody getting disconnected? Now, set plays. We're talking about corner kicks, free kicks. Is it primarily man-to-man or zonal? Individuals responsible for just certain zones without much of switching, moving around rather? Or is it a combination of both? So when we look at the attacking alignment now, and we start off with a number of forward players, right? Is it 2 central strikers, 1 high, 1 withdrawn? Is it 3 forwards with a central striker and 2 wide wingers like in a 4-3-3 system? And what are their movement patterns? How do they move? Do any of them go in? Are any of them inverted wingers where they always cut inside rather than cross? Okay, looking at the midfield composition, what are our numbers in the midfield? What is the formation there? How many of them hold? How many attack? So attacking midfielders, are they more of a passer, runner? What are their tendencies? Do midfielders actually run beyond forwards? And that oftentimes happens with number 8 and 10. Flank players, what are the qualities? What are their strengths, weaknesses? Do they try to pass more, cross? Are they dribblers cutting in? What about the backs? And again, we're talking about attacking principles when we're in possession. So the number of backs. Do all of them stay home? Okay, in the three-back system, that's probably the case. In the back four, we're talking about left and right outside backs, number 2 and number 3, oftentimes joining in the attack, and they're pushing on and going up on the overlapping run. So what about the goalkeeper? What are his or her roles with respect to that? What are the tendencies? So what about the sweeper? Does he step in with the ball, without the ball? Is he always stationary? So in regards to overall attacking tendencies, how do they play? Do they look to gain territory by direct play, essentially getting the ball over their heads, long passes, fewest passes possible to get to their goal? Possession, perhaps? Are they trying to build from the back through the midfield with short combination plays and quick passes? Or is there maybe a playmaker? Okay, many countries, many clubs have playmakers who make it all happen. So in that regard, if there is a playmaker, where and how does he get the ball? Who does he play to? That's also important. Who does he connect well with? How does he influence the game? Is he more of a passer, dribbler? Does he run more? Is there a goal scorer? If so, perhaps we might want to look at eliminating his ball supply. So who scores these goals? Where does he score from? Are they played to feet, or does he like to run onto space? Are those services generally in the air or ground balls? So in assessing strengths and weaknesses, you may want to look at the speed of play, team speed by position, blocks, okay, and this can be both in and out of possession. Size, you can talk about the overall size or size by position. We're talking here more or less of a physical attribute. What about their technical, tactical abilities under pressure? How do they deal with pressure, space, and the opponents? Now, in regards to set pieces, a very important key aspect of the game, what about free kicks? Is it usually a shot on goal or an organized movement? How many players are on the ball? Is it an in-swinger, out-swinger? Is there a target man? Who shoots and with what foot? On corners, do they prefer to go short, long, driven, near post, far post? Are they aiming for a little black hole area? If you're familiar with that terminology, it's this zone right here around 6-yard box that oftentimes sees goals scored with a little flick on. Is there a target man in these corners? Okay. Well, in regards to match analysis all over again, if it comes to our team and being honest with ourselves watching on video, what do we look at and what do we ask ourselves? Are we comfortable in defending? Are we executing our sequences, movements, and passing patterns? Are we getting behind the opposition? Are we able to penetrate? Are our best players involved in this game, or are they a little bit more passive? Are our players doing really what they're supposed to be doing, their respective jobs? And that's roles and responsibilities, that's positional based. So one of my favorites is cause and effect. What did they do, and how do we react to it? That's, again, the art of reading the game and perhaps empowering the players to see those visual cues and make these subtle changes as they come up. So defensively speaking, if they're playing with a sweeper, you may look for a quick change of point of attack, tie up a sweeper, and a central defender. Okay. If there's a zonal back 3 or 4, you may look for an early cross, maybe a withdrawn center forward that plays between the lines with a little flick on or quick 1-2s. What if they're men-to-men? Perhaps a little one-touch. You want to invite pressure so you can eliminate pressure. Combination play with wall passes, double passes, takeovers. And in regards to zonal marking, if they're marking zonally, perhaps dribble penetration, diagonal runs and passes through the seams, and good, sharp, overlapping runs. In regards how they play and we play in the attack, if they play very direct, well, we want to make sure we know what's going on behind our back. So you drop off and you deny the space. You give perhaps one back player more of the ball. Okay, if they're not as good at it, or if they know they're always looking to go forward, you read lack of pressure on the ball up high, and you drop off and you see that player with the ball and the person you're defending. Now, if they're looking to be more possession-oriented and patiently build up from the back through the midfield, maybe a higher pressure, you pinch in, you close the spaces down, you push up midfielders, and you try to disrupt their rhythm. Okay, the same goes with maybe goal kicks and throw-ins. So if they do have a playmaker, well, individual markings might be good there. A goal scorer, certainly want to look off to cut off his supply if he's a prolific goal scorer. And then the choices, do I want to show him inside or outside? That may depend how comfortable he or she may be with his less dominant foot, and act with that. If you really rely on your central support, on your cover and balance, you may want to show him inside. Set up a little trap. So just to summarize, I want to give you a few final tips, and these certainly vary on age groups you coach and certainly vary on the venue. If you're looking, if you're watching a match on TV, the camera usually tends to follow the ball, but if you're looking at the game live, you want to get a good view out there. So some of these tips for reading the game, perhaps use the buddy system. If you can come out with an assistant coach, or maybe have your captain come out, or a few players that are showing leadership qualities. Okay, maybe have the video presentation and put your players down and give them more responsibilities to read every player or a particular block and give you the notes. You want to get there early if you are watching the game live, so you can get a good seat, a good view. Have diagrams, or at least a notebook with things that are printed, so you can quickly diagram positions, whether it's set plays, and the movement patterns in regards to restarts. Get a good vantage point. I think that's key. And ultimately, let the game flow a little bit, right? Just like in coaching in a game methodology, you don't want to step in and start freezing the play and give instructions in the first 10 seconds of the game. You want them to establish a little bit of a rhythm. And in doing so, don't take notes immediately unless something is majorly there. I mean, certainly you can take notes, general information on people's, on players' attributes, physical attributes, but some of the other technical and certainly the tactical aspects will come out a little bit later as the psychological, perhaps fear of the game, a little anxiety if it's a high-level match kind of comes down. And ultimately, I think this is crucial certainly for youth players and youth coaches. You want to make sure you're looking away from the ball. Okay, don't just stare at the ball. There's very little influence you can have on that, but you can certainly look at your back four as we progress from the middle third to the final third, and what is the back four doing? Are they pushing up? What is the goalkeeper doing? Are they pushing the back four up? Is he or she organizing? You can notice these things if you look away from the ball. So, having said that, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for your attention. I'm here available via email if you have any specific questions. This presentation was put together in part with the slides I got from my NSCA Advanced National Diploma instructor, David Gregson. So big thanks to him as well. All right, any questions, shoot me an email. Thanks, take care.